Hi everyone and welcome back. This is part 2 of my Clay Confidential series, and I talk about various themes that interest me. For example, this series is about witches and witchcraft, and I sculpt tiny miniatures out of polymer clay, and they're inspired by the theme of the videos. As I told you before, my name is Magdalena, and I was born and raised in a country called Romania. What's that got to do with witches and magic? Well, other than the fact that in the year of 2017, several self proclaimed witches were sentenced to jail for basically servicing pretty much half of the celebrities and politicians there. Well, not much. Today we'll be going more in depth following the rise of witchcraft in Romania, the way the old traditional village saw and implemented magic, the way witchcraft intertwines with religion over there even to this day, and a few other personal day-to-day occurrences. As I mentioned before, the craft of being a witch is still very much a part of society in Romania, and it's even had a makeover. That means they use branding now to attract clientele. Because if centuries ago, the fortune tellers, for example, would travel for potential clients, well, not anymore, because now there's live streams on Facebook, they have billboards in the middle of the cities, they have verified Instagram pages, and so forth. It's not unusual for people to drive hundreds of miles for an audience or a session, I don't even know how to call it, with a known witch. And boy, does she promise you everything. From better luck with your love life, to getting a better job, or even make your hair grow. Yup, you heard me. They say they can cure baldness. All it takes is money. Or, if you're short on that, they will accept anything from gold, electronics, cars, houses. Yes, people were left homeless after signing their properties over to witches. This brings us to the scandal I was talking about earlier. So, basically, a few of the disgruntled clients, let's call them that, who were pretty prominent people in my country, mostly politicians, they pretty much got scammed by witches there. And I think it went on for years because they did not want to admit to it, but all it took was one person to admit it, and it all got in front of a judge, and from there on, the press had a field trip day with it. Like, it was everywhere on the news, and that's when people, like normal people, found out about the extent that this whole affair went. So basically, that whole trial with the witches was televised, and I did watch a little bit. They promised a lot of things that their clients believed, and they were paid probably in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, which is insane that people would pay that money for. I don't even know if it's fortune telling. I don't know what it is. All I know is that I would never pay my hard worked money for that. Never in my life would I even think about it. And I used to live there, so not just that, but everybody I know, almost everybody, had at least once contacted a witch. So Romania is a relatively new country, yes. I mean the name, because the ground its borders guard, it's been there, well, long before Jesus claimed to walk the earth. There were tribes, all with their own gods. They were polytheistic. They had their own religions and their own traditions. And these traditions, at least some of them, they remained and they evolved over millennia. So now we ended up with villagers in the Carpathian Mountains that have access to gigabyte speed internet, but they also dug up a body because the person in question was haunting them. So what they did was appalling, and it should belong in the Middle Ages. But it happened, and it happened maybe 6 or 7 years ago. Basically, they unearthed the deceased, they took his heart out, and they burned it to ashes. And then guess what? The entire village drank a potion that contained the dead person's remains. Now, how could it be that one place on this planet Earth is so advanced, but at the same time, almost barbarian? Well, see, that's a question I've asked myself ever since I was a teenager. Because in my first year of high school, I kind of discovered there's more to the world. And once I started reading about religions and their history, I kind of realized that I'm what you'd call a skeptic. Maybe nowadays I'm an agnostic, as I still believe a little bit in, I don't want to say a higher power, but maybe I'm just lying to myself and I want to believe there's something more out there. But how could I be a skeptic when I grew up with, I don't know, my grandma having her friends over for coffee every day, but then she'd read in their coffee grounds about the future, and she'd always have an interpretation to my dreams every single day. I have traveled my fair share and met all sorts of people, and I've never ever seen such a close-knitted relationship between the sacred and the profane. How could it be that superstitions survived for a long, long time, even after an entire country was unified and converted to Christianity around the same time when the Roman Empire did? Some of the superstitions and traditions are still believed in and implemented. That's the most important thing. For example, most villages have like a healer, or let's call it a witch, if you will. Usually a woman, and she knows centuries old remedies and recipes for almost every ail known. So we've talked a little bit about the, let's say, positive aspects of going to a witch. But I think most people actually go for the more nefarious side of it. So I remembered how I've heard multiple instances of people who would come and talk to my grandma and like complain to her about finding weird signs, they would call it, inside their house, and they would know some witch has been doing them wrong. Basically, somebody who would want to harm you, okay, they would go to a witch, and I'm not very sure how it would work, but I think depending on what harm you want to bring to your enemy, so the witch would go to funerals. So I'm not entirely sure how it works, if the witch goes herself or she instructs the person to go to funerals, even if people they don't know. Yes, they would go to funerals and they would steal different talismans from there. So for example, I'm an Orthodox, right? And our funerals are pretty intertwined with very pagan traditions and the Christian traditions. So it's a weird mishmash of stuff, right? So whenever you bury somebody, people are throwing sugar there. People are throwing these coins. Sometimes they would throw candy instead of sugar. There would have to be a little bottle of oil. It doesn't matter what oil, like people put vegetable oil, it doesn't matter, right? So these witches would steal those things, including the soil that the man was buried in, right? And bring it back. And with those, they would go ahead and perform a ritual. As I was saying before, people that I have heard with my own ears were saying how they found weird things in their house in places they should not be, right? Like they would find tiny bones, or they would find sugar sprinkled in, for example, the corner of a drawer inside your bedroom dresser. Or they would find drips of oil, and it's always in corners of the room or the ledge of the window, stuff like that. So these people would be saying that they have a lot of bad luck, or close people of theirs died, or bad things happened to them. And at this point, if that happened to you, you would have to go to a different witch. Or if you're more into religion, you would go to a monastery, or to talk to a priest, or to talk to a monk, and they would help you undo all these spells. I don't know if I should call them spells. Let's just call them spells, okay. They would help you undo all these. So basically, if you were a person affected by these spells done onto you, you would go to either another witch, or you would go to a priest or a monk. You would go to a monastery, and they would teach you what to do to fix it. And it's the usual, like go to mass and pray every morning and every evening, and say exactly certain prayers, and read a new chapter every day from the Bible, stuff like that. At this point, what I believe is that it also has this sort of placebo effect on people, if you in your heart believe that something bad was brought onto you by somebody else, I think that you will see all the bad in your life, and you don't see all the good. So you only focus on the negative, and then everything that's positive in your life, it just slips. You do not see it anymore. So obviously you are gonna think that somebody put a spell on you. I remember how maybe 2 decades ago, I went to visit this very old Christian monastery in a super remote place. I remember even now, I drove with my mom and dad for hours. And people would pilgrimage there because there was this crying rock. There's this maybe 2 feet high boulder that leaks, and thousands of people every year want some of it because they believe it's magical. Even then, and I was maybe 9 or 10 years old, I could see it was a very lucrative business practice. Same with the certain days during the year when magic is supposedly at its peak and people pay thousands of dollars for rituals to be performed. I don't know. I think that the Western world sees this whole affair as something interesting, maybe even cool. But from a personal experience perspective, I feel that if there ever was anything even remotely touched by the supernatural, I think it's been washed away and replaced by business-savvy individuals who now live in palaces adorned with golden towers, toilets, and slippers. Yes, there is this one witch whose trademark are her solid gold slippers. So what do you believe about this whole ordeal? Do you think it's myth or reality, supernatural, or a scam? You can let me know in the comments below. Oh, and the next series of videos are gonna touch the birthplace of Dracula, and that is Transylvania, and I'm very excited to tell you more about it. Especially since there are so many misconceptions about the place. I mean, there are people who will Google Transylvania and they will still doubt its entire existence. In the next video, we'll talk about how the place is not swarming with vampires, regardless of what images, movies, and media plastered in our minds. I guess I'll be talking a little bit about the real Vlad. He's the one who we as children growing up there In school, we were taught to respect and be proud of, and not fear its legacy, which, I mean, granted, has a different output on the outside world. We'll also talk a little bit about what vampire means to villagers in the Carpathian Mountains, and I'll tell you more about how they chose to deal with it. And yeah, it's gonna be a little gruesome and cruel details, but it's history and it happened, and it's on us how we deal with it. So if you want to learn more about Romanian myths and legends and spooky tales, which may or may not be true, well, check out my next series of videos, and thanks so much for watching!